Welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On today's show, we're talking all about the biography and best hits of Carla Bley. On this hour, we're going to be talking about some of Carla Bley's best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of the albums we're going to be talking about. The first album is called Escalator Over the Hill. This one's a very expansive album and one of Carla Bley's finest. Many have described this album as a jazz opera. Throughout the album, Carla Bley's superb piano playing, complemented by her bandmates, stands out. Tropical Appetites is another album. This one was released in 1974 and was the sequel to Escalator Over the Hill. The lyrics were made by Paul Haynes based on his experiences in the tropics over the previous years. And an album called Trios featuring Carla Bley, Andy Shepherd and Steve Swallow. It was released in 2013. So this album revisits past compositions by Carla Bley. This is also Carla Bley's debut album on ECM Records. So that was a quick recap of the albums we're going to be talking about on this hour. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva to find out more. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel for archives of today's show on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On today's show, it's about jazz composer Carla Bley. And on this hour, we're going to be talking about some of her best albums of all time. Starting off with this one, Escalator Over the Hill. It was released in 1971. At the time of its recording, this album was one of the longest running jazz works. It was also one of Carla Bley's early album recordings alongside an all-star band. Generated a lot of popularity for her among the avant-garde jazz arena. This album is best defined as a jazz opera. So this album encompasses a variety of sounds and music formats. There's all kinds of music, from rock to early synthesizer to cabaret music. So it's a hallmark jazz album from avant-garde jazz, the format of jazz that's about improvisation. Here's some of the tracks from this album. A clarinet solo from Perry Robinson on Hotel Overture. On the song Why, we are enthralled by Linda Ronstadt's vocals. And a beautiful instrumental piece called Rawalpindi Blues featuring Don Cherry, Paul Motian, Jack Blues and John McLaughlin. So with Escalator Over the Hill, Carla Bley accomplished something legendary in avant-garde jazz. And in 1974, she released a second album, a sequel to Escalator called Tropical Appetites. While this album is not as well known as the predecessor, it does have some interesting points. For example, it was styled after the rock in opposition style of music. That, by the way, was a 70s movement by artists to oppose the music industry that didn't recognize their music. So, unlike Escalator, which was full of varied styles of music and a huge ensemble, Tropical Appetites is all about keeping things short and simple. So now, let's talk about some of the songs from this album. There's a beautiful straight jazz overture that sets the scene for the album, What Will Be Left Between Us and the Moon Tonight. More tracks from the rock in opposition style of the album include Enormous Tots, Caucasian Bird Riffles, and Song of the Jungle Stream. There's also a children's song called Funny Bird Song that dissipates the tension. So, even though Carla Bley was primarily a jazz figure in the 70s, she was experimenting with other formats of music, avant-garde strains of progressive rock. So, like Escalator, this album is a tour de force in experimentation, and while it's not as popular as Escalator, it has the same focus and consistency. Trios featuring Carla Bley, Andy Shepherd and Steve Swallow. It was released in 2013. So this album revisits past compositions by Carla Bley. For example, tracks like Vashka, the suites Le Trois Lagon, Wildlife and The Girl Who Cried Champagne. Beautiful tracks, perfectly performed by her. And Carla's performing alongside an outstanding jazz trio on this album. This is also Carla Bley's debut album on ECM Records. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. That was a bit of insight into some of Carla Bley's best albums of all time. We're going for a short break. I'll be right back after that. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's show, it's about jazz icon Carla Bley. Now for some more festival news. The Cape Town International Jazz Festival is back. It's taking place on the 3rd and 4th of May 2024. So this festival is taking place on 4 stages called Sapphire, Ruby, Emerald and a new outdoor stage called Topaz, offering the thrill of celebration under the open sky. So this year's festivities promise to be an exciting lineup of events and festivities showcasing a diverse range of talent and music styles. So here's a quick peek into the lineup. Matt Bianca, the Yusuf Days Experience, Billy Monama and more. Also, there's food and drink available on premises. This year's festival offers a new feature, the Jazz Ensemble, a hospitality package for VIP guests featuring a luxurious lounge with buffet and complimentary drinks. Also, there's artist masterclasses taking place this year's festival. They provide festival goers the chance to gain invaluable insights on all forms of jazz from some of the top talents in jazz. For more information, please visit capetownjazzfest.com. And that was some trending festival news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Carla Bley's greatest hits of all time. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On today's show, we're talking all about the biography and best hits of Carla Bley. On this hour, we're going to be talking about some of Carla Bley's best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of the albums we are going to be talking about. The first album is called Fancy Chamber. In this album, Bley shows off her finest at chamber music. There's also a beautiful string section in the background. There's a variety of tracks, ranging from melancholy to frivolous, from Wolfgang Tango to The End of Vienna. The next album is called Heavy Heart. It was released on ECM Records in 1984. This album's tracks are light-hearted with a melancholy undercurrent to them. Contains tracks like Talking Hearts, Joyful Noise, and Heavy Heart. By contrast, Night Glow is an album featuring easygoing, relaxing songs. Songs like Night Glow, Crazy With You, and Pretend You're in Love. The album was released on Watts Records in 1985. Fleur Carnivore is another album. This one's a compilation of hits performed by Bley and her ensemble in Copenhagen. Also features Gary Valenti, Andy Shepherd, Wolfgang Puschnig, and more. Features Bley's beautiful renditions of classics like The Girl Who Cried Champagne, Song of the Waiting Canute, and Healing Power. So that was a quick recap of the albums we are going to be talking about on this hour. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva to find out more. We'll be right back after some music. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel for archives of today's show on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On today's show, it's about jazz composer Carla Bley, and on this hour, we're going to be talking about some of her best albums of all time. The first album is called Fancy Chamber. It was released in 1998. Now, Carla Bley has a reputation for being unorthodox, and this album's one such example. The pieces on this album are a mix-up of a variety of intriguing themes and styles. Highlights from the album, the songs Romantic Notions No. 3 and Romantic Notions No. 6. So these pieces were originally written as piano pieces for another artist, Arcela Opens, but here they are reimagined with wind and string instruments. Wolfgang Tango, a similar song featuring wind and strings with the addition of drums and piano. The undertone of clarinet and bass makes it impeccable. End of Vienna is a beautiful vibraphone melody. So overall, it's an album where Carla Bley showcases her chamber music style with a beautiful string section to set the mood. Now for another album, Heavy Heart. This one was released in 1984. This one's a very natural, bright album. The music was all composed by Bley herself. The songs were recorded in 1983 and feature a 10-member band. The music is upbeat and relaxing. In this album, it's all instrumentals: sax, trumpet, tuba, flute, trombone, and piano. And the band ensemble features an all-star band. For example, Wynton Marsalis, a piano icon, electric bass legend Steve Swallow, Victor Lewis, a drummer of repute. Another album called Night Glow, released in 1985. So Night Glow is very similar to its predecessor Heavy Heart. It has the same themes, a warm, easygoing feel to it. So this album features a pina colada theme style of music. It's performed by a basic sextet and a 5-man horn section. Hiram Bullock's on guitar alternates between rock and jazz modes, defining the ambience of the album. Steve Swallow's on bass, highlighting the relaxed vibe. Randy Brecker's on trumpet. Paul McCandless provides the reed and wind instrumentals. So it's a compilation of beautiful hits. Another album, Fleur Carnivore, released in 1989. This album's based on a live recording made in 1988 in Copenhagen, Denmark. The title track is a tribute song to Duke Ellington, featuring saxophone and trumpet music. Andy Shepherd and Wolfgang Puschnig are on saxophone and trumpet. They take things from a slow pace to a swinging stride with their performance. Many of the rest of the songs on this album are similar, but they bring something new to the table every time. For example, the Flagel Hall melody, Ups and Downs. There's also a beautiful gospel song called Healing Power featuring trombone music. The best song perhaps is the Song of the Waiting Canute. This one's a song that's like a fantasy of the natural world and the wild outbacks, and the instrumentals are similarly styled, bringing out the flavor of the theme. So that was a bit of background on some of Carla Bley's most popular albums of all time, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We're going for a short break, be right back after that. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. We've come to an end of today's show, so now let's recap what we were talking about on today's episode. First, a bit about her biography. Carla Bley was a jazz composer, bandleader, pianist, and organist. She was best known for her opera in the 1960s called Escalator Over the Hill. She was also hailed for her many compositions that saw success after they were performed by other greats, from George Russell to John Scofield to Gary Burton. She was also a driving force behind the development of independent artist-owned labels. Between 1996 and 2019, she recorded over 20 albums. Even before she became an icon at the turn of the 21st century, she was still a widely hailed artist. In the 60s and the 70s, she established herself as one of the greatest composers in jazz. Also, a quick peek into some of her best albums of all time. The first album is called Escalator Over the Hill. This one's a very expansive album and one of Carla Bley's finest. Many have described this album as a jazz opera. Throughout the album, Carla Bley's superb piano playing, complemented by her bandmates, stands out. Tropical Appetites is another album. This one was released in 1974 and was a sequel to Escalator Over the Hill. The next album is called Heavy Heart. It was released on the ECM record in 1984. The album's tracks are light-hearted with a melancholy undercurrent to them. Contains tracks like Talking Hearts, Joyful Noise, and A Heavy Heart. Another album called Social Studies. This one's a very unorthodox album, released on the Watts label in 1981. Contains songs like Recreationary Tango in Paris, an abstract take on Argentinian music, Walking Battery Woman, a hard bop song, and You Twinkling Sang, a melancholy song. And an album called Dinner Music. So this album's themed after the process of serving dinner during mealtimes, and the tracks reflect that theme. Also, there's background sounds of dinner-themed noises like cutlery clicking and food being served. So that was a quick recap of everything that we discussed on this week's episode of the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva, and that brings me to an end of today's episode of the Jazz Update. I'll see you again next week. Have a great week ahead.